I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, when you call for an ambulance, you want it there fast. In Multnomah County, though, the odds of that happening seem to be getting worse every passing month. And that is our big story tonight. The problem sounds simple enough to fix. Ambulance provider AMR says it just can't hire paramedics fast enough to staff its fleet. Multnomah County's contract requires 2 paramedics in every rig, so just hire more, right? Apparently, it's not as easy as it might seem. And in the meantime, it's taking longer and longer for ambulances to show up. Sometimes they're not available at all. Evan Watson has been tracking this for us for months, and he joins us with new data to illustrate just how bad the problem has become.
Engine 74, AMR's level 0.
Multnomah County has an ambulance problem. Ambulances are arriving to emergencies later and later, frequently failing to meet the county's standards. In May, a man in a wheelchair, hit by a hit-and-run driver, died in the street while waiting 32 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. Ambulance provider AMR blames a shortage of paramedics and the county's commitment to a 2-paramedic system. But ambulance crews aren't just late to the scene. Often dispatchers don't have any ambulances available to send to emergency calls.
This is a huge issue that I think everybody I know in government is really concerned about. How can we improve the system and what we can do? So it's a big shared priority that we have.
It's called Level 0, a code for when there are 0 ambulances ready to respond. New data shows more than 6,300 Level 0 incidents in Multnomah County over the last 6 months. That's more than 6,000 times when a person called 911 for emergency medical help, and 911 dispatchers couldn't send an ambulance. Every crew working in the county was busy.
That's incredibly disturbing. I mean, I think all of us, if we were having some kind of family emergency, medical emergency, we would want to pick up the phone and be able to have an ambulance come to have a response.
Normally in Level 0 situations, fire crews show up first to provide initial treatment. But fire crews generally can't transport patients. That's what an ambulance is for. So firefighters and patients are forced to wait until one becomes available. So far, Vega Peterson and Multnomah County have not penalized AMR for the slow response times and the thousands of Level 0 cases. The county received about 10,000 emergency calls per month through the first 5 months of the year. That means ambulances were unavailable on dispatch about 10% of the time.
Evan joins me now, and I was wondering, when it's at that Level 0, does that mean no ambulance forever for you, or just hang on, we'll get one to you as soon as possible?
It's a Level 0 at the dispatch level, so there is a hold waiting for the next ambulance to be available. And interestingly, in the data with that, you can see how many calls are waiting on ambulances. It's sometimes 5, 10, 15 911 calls that all need an ambulance to respond. It could be held up in the hospital bay, it could be on a different call with that. So yes, an ambulance will be coming as long as the call still needs that, but then sometimes, it waits too long, and then the opportunity, the chance is gone there.
Wow, okay. And why can't AMR just hire more people?
AMR and other ambulance providers point to a national shortage of paramedics. They say that it's tough to find people with this level of training, and an issue for them as well right now to retain the paramedics that they have and to hire new ones to bring in. And Multnomah County has the 2 paramedic requirement, which we've talked about a lot here on The Story. And so that's what AMR points to. I will say as well, I've asked AMR multiple times to sit down with me and talk about this. So far, I've just received statements. It would go a long way if they'd be willing to chat with me about what they're seeing on the company side.
Come on, AMR, he doesn't bite. Asks tough questions, but doesn't bite. All right, and you have another update on the brown paper ticket story you brought us recently?
Yes, on Friday we shared how Lincoln High School's theater program was owed $11,000 from brown paper tickets, specifically for their fall and winter productions. And I got a message from Tracy Tallarico. She is the theater director, and she tells me she received an email saying the company will pay up by the end of this week. Lincoln High School contracted with Brown Paper Tickets to manage ticket sales for those shows in the fall and the winter, but the company kept the proceeds for more than 6 months. Now, if you remember, we previously covered how Brown Paper Tickets owed money to a ballet studio in Beaverton and a Portland choir as well. Those organizations got their ticket revenue after we shared their stories. Tallarico says the Lincoln High School theater program will use that ticket revenue to put on new shows, pay licensing rights, get costumes, make production and lighting improvements. So some positive news as well today, Pat. And kind of crazy, we've been through this 3 times where we hear from arts programs. I've heard from many others out of state too, and I always tell them to talk to the AG's office, go through these different steps. But when we send an email or make a few calls, then they get their money, and that's been working out.
Well, it's ridiculous that it takes that level, but I'm glad you're able to do that.
Yeah,
thanks Evan. Moving on now to politics. If the Senate Republican walkout in Salem is not resolved, and soon, we're going to see a lot of bills die this session. Dozens, maybe even hundreds. And many have a lot of people fighting for them. We want to revisit a story we first brought you about a month ago. A mom from Clackamas County pushing for House Bill 2676. The bill would expand victim compensation. That's the resources that you're entitled to if you're the victim of a crime. It includes things like counseling and help with medical bills. If passed, HB 2676 would expand the types of things that are covered. One new thing it would cover is strangulation kits. Those are used in hospitals to help people who've been strangled, but they also help nurses collect forensic evidence that can be used in court to prosecute the suspect. They are not used everywhere, but if 2676 passes, it would help get the kits out to more counties and help more victims. Kelly Harris started fighting for the bill after the death of her daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey was strangled in a domestic violence incident and died by suicide days later. Kelly wanted to do something to help out people in her daughter's position. And after we did a story giving people a step-by-step process on how to get involved in Salem, Kelly contacted her lawmakers, who encouraged her to testify for 2676. Here's part of her testimony from April.
The Lynn County District Attorney's Office told me, when it comes to strangulations, juries like to see bruises. I will never forget those words. I was told even if Kelsey had lived to testify against her abuser, the jury might not have believed her since she did not have highly visible neck bruises. This is the picture they took after her strangulation. If strangulation kits had been available in Lynn County at the time of my daughter's assault, they could have made all the difference for Kelsey. I urge you to pass HB 2676.
Kelly tells us it wasn't easy to testify in Salem. She was nervous and emotional about sharing such a painful personal experience. But the bill did pass the Oregon House. In fact, it passed in a big way, unanimously. Every single lawmaker voted in favor. But before the Senate could vote, the Republicans walked out. And now, no work is being done in that chamber. We talked with Kelly again today about her frustration.
All of the advocates that I've been working with so far have been of the mindset that this is not going to pass this term because it's not even going to make its way for a vote. Despite the fact that it's budget neutral, it's not going to cost the taxpayers any more money. It's bipartisan support from square one, and it just makes common sense. But unfortunately, common sense doesn't seem to be anything that's happening right now in the legislature, and I really hope for the sake of all Oregonians that this changes, and this changes quickly. But what an incredible waste of time, because in the meantime, all of those other Kelseys that are all over the state are going to not have the support and the funding they need.
Kelly says she's frustrated that lawmakers can't figure it out to come together to work on the bills that would help a lot of people.
Well, if this doesn't get past this legislative session, then we start all over again. We have to literally start this bill from scratch, which is a waste of time, a waste of money, and a waste of resources. It's very frustrating for me as one individual, just a mom that's trying to get something done to help others. And it's also angry, it makes me angry for not just myself, but for everyone else. Because, as I said, nobody's winning except the criminals by stalling this legislation. And I think more than anything else, I'm an Oregonian, all those senators are Oregonians, all the constituents they serve are Oregonians, and somehow Oregonians have not been able to come together and do the right thing.
Kelly says that if the bill does not pass this session, she is willing to start the work all over again for her daughter's sake and for the sake of other domestic violence victims. But she's hoping she doesn't have to. And while we're on the topic of the legislature, we wanted to update you on a big story involving the Oregon Democratic Party. You may remember the drama surrounding the $500,000 donation to Democrats last fall. It came from a former executive at the disgraced cryptocurrency exchange FTX. State elections officials fined the Democratic Party $15,000 for wrongly reporting the source of that donation last year. The fine was originally $35,000, but the night before a hearing on the issue, the Elections Division slashed the fine. Now it's notable because Oregon's Director of Elections is the former Deputy Director for the Democratic Party of Oregon. So the optics there, not great, to say the least. Naturally, state Republicans were quick to blast the Democrats, demanding that they return the $500,000. But for weeks, the Dems stayed relatively quiet on that front, not saying whether they were going to give the money back or not, until now. On Friday, the party said they are indeed sending it back. They plan to send the $500,000 to the U.S. Marshals, which the feds say will be used to compensate victims of the FTX fraud. The Democrats are pulling money from the campaign accounts of these high-ranking officials: Governor Tina Kotek, U.S. Senators Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, and U.S. Representatives Earl Blumenauer, Suzanne Bonamici, and Val Hoyle. The Democrats also say they're giving back a $7,100 donation from FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried per a request from the Department of Justice. Bankman-Fried faces a slew of federal charges related to the demise of FTX. He's pleaded not guilty. But the announcement that the Democrats will return the money appears to be the end of a chapter that the Dems would certainly like to forget.
Up next on The Story, steel animal traps, homemade spike strips, and tripwires meant to fire a shotgun shell, all found on a property in southern Oregon, creating a dangerous maze of madness for FBI agents. Tonight, we're getting a closer look at the homemade weapons, all of it evidence used against a man in federal court who is no stranger to law enforcement. That's next, when The Story returns.
It's a term that you often hear in TV crime dramas or even Hollywood movies: booby traps. And this week we're getting our first look at devices that were used at a home in southern Oregon, injuring an FBI bomb technician. That includes a hot tub turned on its side to act as a giant wheel ready to roll over anyone who entered the property. These are part of courtroom exhibits used in the federal trial of a 71-year-old man who was found guilty of several crimes, Investigative reporter Kyla Boshi requested the evidence from the feds, and he joins us with the story.
Deep in the southern Oregon woods, police and the FBI found a home rigged with hidden danger, including booby traps, barricades, and tripwires. The rural property even had a round hot tub turned on its side, designed to flatten anyone who approached, said prosecutors, much like a scene from the movie Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Earlier this month, a federal jury convicted the man who crafted these makeshift weapons. 71-year-old Gregory Rodvelt was convicted of multiple crimes. Now, for the first time, we're able to see photos and video presented at trial. Rodvelt had lost his home in a lawsuit, and after learning it would be sold, federal prosecutors say he set up a maze of booby traps. When law enforcement arrived on September 7, 2018, they found a minivan blocking the gate, steel animal traps hidden under the hood. They also found homemade spike strips along the long gravel driveway. A sign warned, "Property is protected by improvised munitions." The hot tub was rigged to roll down a hill if anyone opened the gate. Police and the FBI used an explosive charge to breach the front door. No one was inside the home. While entering, investigators bumped a wheelchair. It triggered a homemade shotgun device, striking an FBI bomb tech in the leg. He was treated at the hospital and released. A closer look revealed the booby trap used fishing line as a tripwire, which set off a mousetrap triggering a shotgun shell. Federal agents later recreated the homemade weapon to see how it worked and the damage that could be done. Rodvelt was later arrested in Arizona, where he spoke with police.
If you people are correct, then, and the property has changed hands, I don't want anybody else getting hurt.
Rodvelt faces up to 20 years in prison after setting up a tangle of barricades and booby traps that wounded an FBI bomb technician. Rodvelt has been involved in a series of violent incidents, including domestic abuse, according to public records. In 2017, Rodvelt made headlines for barricading himself inside an SUV with a gun and refusing to leave an Arizona highway. Sentencing in the Oregon case is scheduled for October. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
Thanks, Kyle. Still to come on the story. We hear a lot about the need for more affordable housing, if it's even built. There's usually a story celebration for the construction, and then we don't really hear about it again. But there's one affordable housing complex in Northeast Portland that opened over 2 years ago, and according to tenants, things are not going well. Why they describe it like living in hell when the story returns.
Coming up here at 6:30, a violent morning in North Portland. A string of armed robberies and assaults on Interstate Avenue prompts an hours-long manhunt and ends with a man in custody. Plus, ready to strike. Providence nurses demand a better contract, say they're preparing to walk off the job next week, how it could affect patients. And did you know wolves can fish? How trail cameras are giving researchers a glimpse of their hidden talent. That's all ahead at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
When it comes to addressing the homeless crisis and the housing shortage, there are a lot of factors to consider. One that's gotten a lot of attention is the shortage of affordable housing. There are a lot of efforts to try and provide more housing for people who need it. But once affordable housing is built and people move in, well, that's not exactly the end of the story. An article from Willamette Week demonstrates that, and we think it is worth your time. The headline, a $28 million low-income apartment complex descends into chaos in just 2.5 years. It's about the Burry Building, a complex in Northeast 99th and Gleason that opened in 2020. Looks cool from the outside. It houses people making 60% or less of Multnomah County's median income. Many living there pay just under $1,000 a month, according to Willamette Week. But after the affordable housing opened, people living there told the paper that management failed to take care of it. Here's how one tenant summed it up. "It's like living in hell here," says Alan Lumpson. Here's a quote from the article. "Tenants let homeless friends in from the street who shoot up in the stairways, sleep on couches in common areas, smoke fentanyl in the elevators, and vandalize plumbing. They pound and pry at residents' door. People defecate in the stairways. Lately, a woman from the street has been roaming the halls with a hatchet," tenants say. Willamette Week confirmed that emergency services have been called to the building dozens of times for stabbings, assaults, shots fired, vandalism, and one death. The building was funded and built using tax-exempt bond programs, low-income housing credits, and public money. But once it opened, it was turned over to the nonprofit Northwest Housing Alternatives, and then they had a for-profit company called Cascade Management run the place. Tenants tell Willamette Week that the property management company does not respond to their concerns and that there's no one to show up for emergencies. They say parts of the building, like the elevators and the security system, need to be repaired. Northwest Housing Alternatives says they are aware of the problems in the building and that they're working with the property manager to fix them. The property manager, Cascade Management, blamed Portland. According to Willamette Week, Cascade says there are systemic issues in the neighborhood that affect the building. You can check out the entire article right now at wweek.com. They go in depth about what people living at the Burry Building are dealing with and why finding a capable property manager for affordable housing can be difficult. Yesterday, we brought you a story about Oregon's Public Retirement Fund. The state attorney general and the treasurer are looking into what they're calling a possible breach of fiduciary duty by the corporate parent of Fox News. Here's what that means. The state of Oregon owns around $12 million of Fox Corporation stock. State leaders are looking into whether or not Fox's board of directors harmed that investment by allowing Fox News to broadcast the false claims of the stolen election in 2020. Those false claims eventually led to the settlement with Dominion Voting Systems to the tune of nearly $800 million. The money the state has in Fox stocks represents a tiny amount, just 0.0127% of the state's pension fund. But leaders are considering a lawsuit against the Fox board, and the first step in that process is what's called a books and records request, which is now underway. We asked for your thoughts on all this, and you had plenty to say.
I am a retiree with the state, so I receive PERS, and I have to say that I am shocked that the PERS, my retirement, has so much money invested in Fox News, who I do not approve of in their propaganda. I am just aghast. So I say yes, follow through and see if we can sue them and get out of Fox News now. Thanks.
We heard that from a few folks. Fred wrote in, "I believe it is absolutely justified to investigate Fox. I find solace that even though that investment represents a small percentage of the total, they are taking seriously any potential impact on the fund." We also asked if you think this exploration of a lawsuit was a good bit of political posturing, perhaps, by state leaders, since the stock represents such a small part of the state portfolio. A loyal viewer named Margie does not think so.
For what it's worth, I do not think that suing Fox is at all retaliatory or even particularly politically motivated. Yet this needs to be done as a necessary deterrent, so it's almost just a matter of when, not if, they will put Oregon stockholders in jeopardy once again.
But a viewer named Matt disagrees, writing in, Petty, vindictive, and political. I will be collecting a pension from the state in the future and see this as a stunt the Oregon Democrats are gleefully chasing down. Fox was wrong and misleading, and our courts have settled that. Marcel asked an interesting question. How much has the state invested in Target or InBev, Bud Light's parent company? Are they doing the same thing? As in exploring a lawsuit to protect the investment. Marcel goes on, the answer will tell you if this is all political. Both of those companies have lost billions in market cap recently due to fallout from different controversies surrounding Pride Month and an Instagram post featuring a transgender influencer. Today, we asked the Treasury Department and the Attorney General's office if the state does have money invested in those companies and how much. The Treasury office sent us a statement indicating that Fox's Dominion settlement is what raised this to the level of protecting shareholders based on decisions by the company's board. But they made no mention of the other companies, nor whether the state has money invested in them. So there you go on that one. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching, and remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. And one quick programming note for you. We'll be here tomorrow as usual, but then we're not going to have a show for Thursday or Friday because of the U.S. Open Golf Tournament. So don't worry when you don't see us those days. We'll be back on normal on Monday. In the meantime, tonight, stick around for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.